What do you think makes the perfect snack?
It's gotta be when I'm really craving it and it's convenient.
Could you be more specific?
When it's cravenient.
Okay.
Like a freshly baked cookie made with real butter, available right now in the street at AM/PM, or a savory breakfast sandwich I can grab in just a second at AM/PM.
I'm seeing a pattern here.
Well, yeah, we're talking about what I crave.
Which is anything from AM/PM.
What more could you want?
Stop by AM/PM where the snacks and drinks are perfectly craveable and convenient. That's Cravenience. AM/PM, too much good stuff.
In a so-called free state, officials and stakeholders concoct solutions to problems often created by other bureaucrats and with little regard for infringements on the people. These stories are born at the apex of freedom and entrepreneurship. We foolishly advocate for the taxpayer. Brian's Beat presents Freedom Fools.
Hour two of Freedom Fools on WBSM. Brian with you. A couple of things going to bring it home. A couple of things that I want to bring up. One, dealing with housing, and the other dealing with, well, something dealing with the holidays. The quote of the day: only with both economic liberty and personal liberty can countries prosper, economies thrive, and individuals lead happy, autonomous, fulfilling lives. That quote from David Berglund, author, chief founder of the Libertarian Party, way back when. Let's see, I'm going to flip my coin right here. All right. So here it is. Governor Healy. No, I'm not a fan, but I do like what she is stating that she is going to do come election 2026. The governor was on Boston Public Radio, and she was asked about the rent control measure. Her response: look, I understand the need, the interest in rent control, right? I mean, that's why I've worked really, really hard to build as many houses as I can. Pardon me, I'm hitting the microphone because I'm throwing my hands up in the air. You got to be kidding me. She's working really, really hard to build as many houses as she can. First of all, if Maura Healey has a shovel in the ground, there are cameras around to take the video and the stills. But isn't that what we expect from the governor, to try to take credit? Look, I'm building housing. And you're right. Governors and mayors, they do that. And I suppose presidents and senators and congresspeople, I guess that's when they come out of the woodwork. But in this particular case, I applaud the governor because she says that if the rent control ballot question is on the November 2026 ballot, she will vote against it. I read that and I thought, she's got to be lying. Because I really can't see the governor trying to vote against the ballot measure. But look, she's coming out and stating it, but you and I aren't going to know any better if she does or doesn't. She could go into wherever she's going to vote and tell us she voted against it, but in reality, vote for it. Look, there are going to have to be a lot of things that change between now and that first Tuesday in November of next year. Right now, I'm on the record as saying I am against rent control, and I'm going to fight to make sure that we don't get rent control throughout the Commonwealth. But I do believe, as I think right now, that it's going to pass. But should I give prop to the governor who's saying that she won't support the measure? If this is something new to you, you probably didn't sign on like 88,132 others did. Actually, more than that. Those were the ones that were certified by the Secretary of State's office. 88,132 signatures. This is what I have to say about rent control and the housing problem. One of the major reasons we have housing problems in our area is because there's so much red tape. As I look, and correct me if somebody knows any better, correct me. But I haven't seen any places from Wareham to Somerset. I haven't seen any place that is like a tiny home community. You know, I guess you can look at it as like a mobile home park, but it's for tiny homes. I don't see too many places that have places where tiny homes can regularly park. You might have to pay a fee, but there's no place for that. Do you realize if there were less regulations, people could build a tiny home, live in that tiny home, and survive a lot better than they would if they could get one of these newly constructed apartments that are going to be opening up on what's Talbot Arms. We've got Hillman. We've got the Firehouse. We've got a whole bunch of units that are in the process of being prepared and that are going to open in 2026. But as affordable as they're meant to be, we've already found out by talking to people that they can't afford them. If your rent, I'm going to use a nice round figure, is $1,500 a month, affordable by most people, even in the city of New Bedford, $1,500 a month. But if you cannot afford $1,500 right now, how stable is rent control going to be? If it's $1,500 and it can go up 5%, that's what, $75? In theory, not a lot of money. That means you're going to pay $1,575 a month starting that next year. But here's the problem. You couldn't afford $1,575 is just another burden on top of the burden that you already have. Whereas you have people that are seniors and you have young people who could afford to go out and get themselves a tiny house. Why do I say a tiny house? Because a tiny house comes with a tiny price tag. And if you get a tiny house on wheels, well, that's even more affordable because you can drive it from point A to point B. If you work for a company, maybe you can drive it to work and work out a deal with your employer and stay there a night or two, whatever the case may be. But the point is, right now, if somebody wants to buy a house, I have a son. I have two sons, but one son that would love to buy a house. And he makes pretty decent coin compared to what what Dad was making at his age and his experience at that particular time. But housing prices have gone, no pun intended, through the roof to the point that he and his fiance, it's too difficult for them to even try to save for a down payment. You're talking $35,000, $40,000, $50,000 for a down payment on a house. Can you imagine that? $50,000 for a down payment to buy a house. People cannot afford. It's to the point, not only can they not afford it, but they can't even think about saving for something like that. And by the way, if you do sock money away year after year, in theory, how long would it take to save up $50,000? That would be roughly $5,000 a year over 10 years. But what happens? It actually takes longer than 10 years. Why? Because you're taxed on the savings. Isn't that amazing? You earned, and I know the framers of the Constitution, they weren't expecting this to happen, but it's happening. So in other words, you have a withholding tax from your paycheck. Then you have your income tax, whatever is greater or lesser at the end of the year. You know how that part works. There's a sales tax on just about everything, except for food. In many states, there's a clothing tax. Luckily, not here in Massachusetts, or I think we have a clothing tax at something over $250. But in general, no clothing tax here in the Commonwealth. Then you're taxed on your savings. So in other words, you save $5,000. I don't know what that percentage is, but then you're going to lose some money because it's still in the bank. It gets added into your taxes at the end of the year. I don't think the framers of the Constitution meant for that to happen. And yet here we are. This is what I'm talking about. It's funny because you look at some of the surveys, people talking about their biggest financial worry. Taxes are one of the least worried about things. And you know why that is? Because usually you only think about taxes once a year. And that's when it's tax time, sometime between the beginning of the year, January 2nd, let's say, and April 15th. There are others that take the extension, but by and large, that is when people think about taxes. How much am I getting back, or how much am I going to have to pay? But the truth is, you don't think about taxes because there's a withholding tax, which your employer takes care of for you. So you don't really see it. You get a check, it's got the net. X amount of dollars were already paid. You might be upset that you paid it, but, out of sight, out of mind. Sales tax. You go into a store, you buy something, 6.25 or 5% or whatever it's going to be, whatever store that you went into. You don't really think about it. It's a hidden tax. You don't, here in the Commonwealth, you don't think about tax on alcohol or on tobacco or on gasoline because it's hidden right in there. We are taxed to death. In fact, in this nation, we even have an inheritance tax. People don't want to think about it. But I bring all that up because it's very difficult for people to save up for a down payment on a home. Not that it can't be done, but you have to save an overwhelming amount of money in order to be able to do it. And with gasoline prices, what they are, with home heating oil prices, what they are, gas for heating the house, heating the hot water, electricity, and these are things most people have to pay. By the way, going back to that tiny home experience, if you have a tiny home with solar panels on the roof, you're off the grid. You don't have to worry about the electric bill every month and the, what do they call it, the delivery charge. Not only that, here in New England, if you have a wood stove inside that tiny home, whatever you pay for wood is your heating bill. But, and I'm not really exaggerating this, but I want to give the opinion that maybe I might be. But sometimes I get the feeling that when we talk about zoning in New Bedford, zoning in Fairhaven, zoning in Dartmouth, when we talk about zoning, sometimes I get the feeling it's not so much zoning for safety reasons as it is zoning to please the pockets of companies and government. So what do I mean? If you have a tiny home, as I just explained, you've got legal loopholes to get around paying Eversource or whatever oil company. Depending on how you've set up that tiny home, you can get around having a regular water bill, water and sewer bill. You can dump your waste. You can compost. You can just have it incinerate, a toilet that incinerates, and just dump the waste in the trash can. So I think that you've got planning boards and boards of appeal working with contractors, working with the utility companies, because they all have a vested interest. If you're in a tiny home on wheels, guess what? You might pay a excise tax on the tiny home on wheels, but you're not going to pay a property tax unless you own the property that the tiny home is on. Well, the folks running the city or town, they want that property tax. So it's more lucrative to the city town to have you in an apartment or a house that pays a property tax. That also helps out with the Eversources of the world, because then you're going to pay an electricity bill, you're going to pay a gas bill, or if you don't have a gas hookup, you'll pay an oil bill. Cities and towns, they like this. They want a regular source of money coming in. I don't know how many people that are listening to this show are also on the planning board or the Board of Appeals. But if you noticed, people that want to build apartments, what they call affordable housing, it really isn't that affordable anymore because of all of the contraptions. I'm not saying these contraptions aren't good, but let's think about it for a second. Smoke detectors, good to have them, yeah. But should you be forced to have them? Carbon monoxide detectors, good to have them, yes. Should you be forced to have them? Should you be forced to pay for a delivery charge if you've got solar panels on your roof? Should EverSource, in our case, still charge you a delivery charge even though you're supplying them with excess electricity? I say no. I guess most people say yes. I know this is challenging for some. I prefer to have a well and septic. And I know it's expensive when you've got to replace your pump on your well, and it's maybe $150 to get the company to come by to dump your septic. But that $150 to get the septic dump, it's going to last you a year and a half, as opposed to paying a water and sewer bill each and every month. And of course, that septic has to be built. Government loves to have you pigeonholed. You're going to pay the property tax. And we may not be able to get you on a water and sewer bill each and every month. But we know we've got you with electricity. We've got you with gas. And Governor Healy, I guess I don't know what she's feeling. She's feeling, or what she is saying, is that, yes, we have a housing affordability problem. She admits that. But she doesn't think rent control is the answer. And I agree with the governor. I don't think rent control is the answer. The funny thing is, I believe that the majority of people, or at least the majority of people that will be voting from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in November of 2026, I think they're going to vote in rent control. My guess is there are plenty of people that will vote against rent control in 2026. I'd love to hear from folks that are for it. Give me your reason why you think rent control is one of the answers. One of the answers to the problem, why you believe that a statewide rent control policy is good not only for New Bedford, but also for Westport and Swansea and all the other communities. Love to hear your thoughts on that. 508-996-0500. Hello.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
To be more specific, the ballot question doesn't make every city and town have rent control. They have the democratic right to vote whether they want it or not in their city or town. It just gives people freedom. And I thought you were for freedom.
Let's try that. Try that again. It makes
the ballot question does not make cities and towns have rent control. They still have the autocracy to vote for or against it if it comes up for a vote in their city or town. So,
see, I thought that was. I thought that's the one that they had a couple of years ago that went down.
No, that's the current one.
It is?
It only takes away the 1974 prohibition statewide of having any rent control. So people have freedom of choice under this ballot question. And it's expected that not many cities or town city councils, selectmen, etc., will choose to have rent control.
You know, you're the first person that I've heard say that, and I've had people on this show talking about it. I'll give you the benefit of a doubt, but that's not the way I understood this ballot question to be.
Well, I'm getting it from WGBH news reports, and they have a large enough staff to know what's going on.
Is it a current report?
Yeah, this is current. That is what this ballot question is really doing, is removing the 74 one. So people have freedom. So nobody's going to be forced undemocratically to have rent control. They're not. So that could be a media lie in order to turn people against it. But
well, I'll tell you what.
Let me finish.
Hold on. I want you to hold on a second. If it is the way that you are presenting it, and you're correct, I am for freedom. If the people of a community voted in, I would be okay with that.
I don't think you would, because it goes against your capitalist principle.
No, if people voted in, whether I voted in or not, I would go with it. So in other words, I live in Dartmouth. If Dartmouth residents voted in rent control, I might not like it. I might even move out of Dartmouth, but I would go with it.
Well, the polls indicate that all across the state, rural areas also, 70% of people want this option.
I think you're right.
Well,
I'm surprised. I think it's higher than that.
It's in the Boston Globe. So let's not paint draconian point of view on the ballot question to get it dismissed. As far as the governor is concerned, her plan to address the state of emergency in Massachusetts, which is now several years old, it ain't working because big developers don't see any profit down in New Bedford, for example. You could build a big high-rise, but there's few people with the money to pay for those expensive apartments. I don't see any solution to it, really. The Trump administration is not going to be like Franklin Delano Roosevelt and have the 1937 Housing Act to build federal high-rise buildings. That's not going to happen. So you may dislike it, but what are you going to do with the homeless people to prevent dysfunction, juvenile delinquency, crime, squalor, health problems? Well, I guess it has to be tent cities. That would reduce those problems. It costs $58,000 to house a prisoner in Massachusetts. Is that what the authorities are okay with, by leaving people on the street in squalor and despair?
Is that what they're asking for? Or are they saying they don't want rent control? That's the picture you're painting.
Would you rephrase that question?
Yes. So you're asking if people want folks out in squalor and despair. And I'm saying that I don't think that's what they're saying, but that's the picture you're painting.
Well, there's not going to be any high-rise apartments built in New Bedford.
I don't think so.
There's no motivation to do so. The rent payers are low income. The average income of a New Bedfordite worker is $29,000 a year. That's just above the poverty level.
Well,
So
it's above the poverty level, huh?
We're stuck with squalor and inhumane conditions. There'll be more and more people that will be out on the street.
Well, as I was stating earlier,
go ahead.
As I was stating earlier, if we didn't have as many zoning laws and rules to put up with, maybe the price tag, I shouldn't say maybe, the price tag would come down on buildings, extra property around here. Or having smaller properties.
To the news last week that the sewer plant indicated that the amount of sewerage in the city is basically 20% higher than it was a number of years back, indicating the real population of New Bedford is 120,000 people, and about 20,000 of those people are suffering the rent increases, living with relatives, living with cars, living with the streets. They're not building any homeless shelters for the 200 people that are out there. They got room for about 45 on Division Street. That's nothing. So eventually, this city will be an unpleasant place to visit or live in because they're waiting for capitalism to take care of the problem. And the only thing that could do it is socialism, like FDR's programs. And he's well hated by, the rich and the Republicans of that ilk. Not everybody, but of that ilk.
I got you. Thank you.
Okay, keep it up. You had interesting things to say about Empire, but I wanted to see where you would go elsewhere. What are you having a guest in the third hour?
Nope, not today. Guest on Monday.
You're the guest, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. 508-996-0500. I have talked to numerous folks dealing with the campaign on rent control. And the previous caller is the only one to state that if this gets voted in, rent control gets voted in by Massachusetts voters in November, if it even makes it that far, but if it gets voted in by Bay State voters, then it reverts to the cities and towns to also vote for rent control. Now, I knew about an effort to get a ballot question a few years ago that did it that way. But I was pretty sure, and this caller was the only person to state that folks would have to still vote it in your particular community. Now, I don't know if that means the city councils, select boards, town meeting, or if that means a vote of the people. But if it is a vote of the people, again, that I wouldn't vote for it. But if I live in Dartmouth, if the people in Dartmouth voted it in, I'd be hard-pressed to think I'm going to pack my bags and move because in this particular case, it wouldn't affect me. Or at least it's not slated to affect me. But, I guess it could if I decided to rent an apartment. But I don't. I'll double check during a commercial break and see that. I've got the would-be question, and nothing that I read ever stated that. But look, the caller could be perfectly right, and I would hate to think that he's going to call here and just make something like that up. 508-996-0500. Would it change your opinion? You take your city, your town, if the people of your city or town had a right to vote rent control in or rent control out, and they decided to vote it, if you're against it and they decided to vote it in, would you be okay with that? Would you be okay if New Bedford voted in rent control? You live in New Bedford. You might be against it. To me, that, to the counter the caller's point, to me, that is freedom. That would almost be the ultimate freedom. If people of a community voted in, that means they want it. It might not mean I want it. But to me, that is the system working at its best. And so, yes, freedom, Brian, will go along, especially if it's not going to affect me. I definitely could see that working. 508-996-0500. Freedom Fools.
Is it about stopping narcotics, or is this about getting rid of President Maduro?
This is WBSM.
Jiffy Pop, the magic treat. As much fun to make as it is to eat.
You know, most people are not business owners, but just about everybody knows one. The dirty little secret is most owners don't qualify for a bank loan because they lack collateral. At Legitimate Business Funders, owners can get up to $2 million in funding with no collateral, even with a low credit score. And they can get that funding in a couple of days. Find Legitimate Business Funders online at legitimatebusinessfunders.com. Legitimatebusinessfunders.com.
Traveling for business or pleasure? Instead of booking online, first call Low Cost Air. Let a real person compare prices and schedules. With Low Cost Air, booking is your option, which means there's no obligation to purchase anything at all. Call Low Cost Air to compare. 800-221-6085. Low Cost Air, 800-221-6085. Low Cost Air is proud to sponsor Brian's Beat on the radio and online.
There's no better fool than the Freedom Fools. Now, back to Brian.
I said a government's a way, way, way too big. Government's a way, way, way too big. You know that government's a way, way, way too big. So tell us what you gonna do to make it small. Your move.
We should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military.
Gee, Mr. President, I think you've already started to do that. So I'm looking up to find out a little bit more about rent control, and I've actually sent out a couple of notices to the people, the instigators of the ballot question. A couple of things that I have here from New Boston Post. A 1994 voter-passed law, of which yours truly was part of the effort to ban rent control, did do that. And the concept has stalled on Beacon Hill for years, facing skepticism from top Democrats and real estate interest. The 74,574 signature requirement for all ballot measures derailed an effort 2 years ago to place a local rent control question on the 2024 ballot. A committee called Housing for Massachusetts filed this month to lead the opposition to the ballot question. So, as I'm reading this, and pretty much as I thought, there was an effort 2 years ago to try to do a local option. That did not go through in 2024. And so it is my understanding, and certainly with the people that I have brought on to this show, that this ballot question does not give a local option. And it's my understanding, my gut, that if it was a local option, we'd be talking about it. New Boston Post would be writing about it. Governor Healy would be talking about it. But I don't see that. 2 years ago, yes, it was a local option question. This time around, I don't believe that it is. I believe this time around, it is meant that it's meant to be the opposite of 1994. So in other words, back in 1994 or prior to that election, you did have a local option. Your community could vote in rent control. The question that passed in 1994 forbade the communities and any other community from ever adopting rent control. It is my understanding and my belief that if voters in 2026 pass the rent control question, that it is for all 351 communities. And I think it takes effect on January 1 of 2027, whatever the rent was, January 1st, 2026. When we get to January 1st, 2027, it's either going to be the cost of living increase or a 5% increase, whichever is the lesser of the two. 508-9960-500 if you'd like to further discuss. That's just one of the questions that's coming up. Another question that I expect the voters will indeed have to approve is a question dealing with the income tax, lowering the income tax progressively, if you'll pardon the term, from 5% down to 4%. I wonder, so these ballot questions, all right, the folks that were working to get the income tax reduced from 5 to 4%, they had to get up the necessary 74,574 certified signatures. They got well over that amount. Now, the legislature between now and I believe April, maybe it's May, can automatically adopt dropping the sales tax from 5 to 4% over a 4-year period, basically. Or they can let the voters decide. My guess is they're not going to drop it. They're not going to vote in that tax decrease. Why? Because they love having our money. And they're going to put up an effort to make sure that the ballot question doesn't pass. They're going to get the teachers' unions out there fighting for it. They're going to get the SEIU out there fighting to keep the tax up high. Can you imagine that? The SEIU, they've got members. These members have families. And they're going to be out there preaching to their people to get out there, not only vote, but make sure you vote against lowering the income tax here in the Commonwealth. Teachers, same thing. Teachers are always complaining they don't have enough money. We don't make enough money. Well, you'd make a little bit more if your state income tax went from 5% down to 4%. And they're going to be quibbling, oh, but we're not going to be able to get all the supplies. Have you wondered about that? Since schools have made the effort to give students computers, what kind of supplies do these kids really need? I remember as a kid, we got pencils, we got erasers, we got yellow and white lined paper. When a teacher gave a test, they had to run it on the mimeograph machine to make sure that there were enough copies for everybody. That ink always had a good smell to it, too. But nowadays, those tests are on the computer. That saves a lot of paper. Easy for the teachers to correct. Don't have to go out and buy a whole bunch of erasers, pencils, and I suppose pens. Do kids even bring pens to school anymore? I really don't know. I've been out of that for the longest time. But I do believe on the supply side, since kids are now getting computers, we're saving quite a bit of money. And when you look at artificial intelligence getting ready to rear its head, we'll be able to save even more money. And depending on which ones get replaced, will it be the teaching assistant, the student teacher, the regular classroom teacher, the substitute teacher? There's going to be tremendous savings coming from the teacher side of the street. We'll also be able to save on vice principals. And if these school systems really get their act together, you'll be able to save a lot of money on what's going on at the school department building, because you're not going to need anywhere near as many people working over there. And so I will help lead that charge to drop the state income tax from 5% down to 4%. I realize it's going to be dropped incrementally, 0.25% per year, each year, over a 4-year period. But I'm okay with that. At least things are going in the right direction. I would prefer no state income tax. And there are plenty of states that work damn well without one. Florida seems to be able to do it. Texas seems to be able to do it. Not that I'm moving to South Dakota anytime soon, but they're doing it. Oregon functions very well without a sales tax. They do have an income tax. I don't think Washington State has an income tax, or at least when I was there, it did not. So there are states that can function very well without a state income tax. Don't you think that New Hampshire does more than an adequate job of functioning, of taking our residents and our businesses, and they move up to the Granite State? So why is it that we have to be burdened with a 5% income tax? So I'm definitely, let's vote no on that particular tax.
The supply chain is not part of the economy. The supply chain is the economy.
This is WBSM.
Post crispy critters.
The one and only cereal that comes in the shape of animals.
Get those crispy critters.
The one and only cereal that comes in the shape of animals.
You know, most people are not business owners, but just about everybody knows one. The dirty little secret is most owners don't qualify for a bank loan because they lack collateral. At Legitimate Business Funders, owners can get up to $2 million in funding with no collateral, even with a low credit score. And they can get that funding in a couple of days. Find Legitimate Business Funders online at legitimatebusinessfunders.com. Legitimatebusinessfunders.com.
People ask all the time, who the heck is Low Cost Airlines? Well, we're not just one airline. When you're talking to us, you're talking to everyone. We are the discount supermarket for all airline tickets. Plus, we have all the airlines and always have the best prices. American, Delta, United, plus all the specialized international airlines and a lot more. And we make it easy. We guarantee you'll talk to a live human in 60 seconds. You can have the rates you need and have your trip booked in 5 minutes. Now, how cool is that? And remember, when you're talking to us, it's like talking to every single airline available with one fast phone call. All you need to do is call and find the best prices to fly wherever it is you want to go. So are you ready? Call Low Cost Airlines right now. 800-221-6085. 800-221-6085. 800-221-6085. That's 800-221-6085.
Freedom Pools on WBSM. Here's more with Brian Thomas.
That's what I want.
It begs the question, when you see a black pilot, you wonder, you say, I hope they are qualified. I wouldn't think that if the CEO of United or these airlines would reject DEI and say excellence is the ultimate standard.
Is that what you think when you see a black airline pilot? Or a female airline pilot?